Hello, everyone. Again, welcome to the 2020 Ignatian Family Teach-In for Justice. I'm Jocelyn Sideco, follower of Jesus, a friend of St. Ignatius, a companion to you, and as you continue or as you begin your own journey towards a more just and humane society. So although I'm usually in the beautiful California Bay Area, my family and I headed east as the smoke from the wildfires of this fall limited our ability to breathe fresh air. Thank you, Regis University, for this stunning background. And like the university, I want to pay a special, respectful acknowledgement that this land served as the traditional homeland for the Arapaho, the Cheyenne, the Apache, the Kiowa, and the Comanche nations. I also wanted to acknowledge the person from whom this university is named after, St. John Francis Regis. So he's a French Jesuit, and he was known to be a pretty good preacher and someone who was always at service for those at-risk women and youth. Place and context are pretty critical to me. So today's sharing comes from the Central American University, or the Uka Martyrs Meditation Garden here at Regis University in Denver, Colorado. So Regis, like many other Jesuit campuses, commemorate the lives and the ministries of the 6 Jesuits and their 2 companions who were martyred on November 16th, 1989 at the Universidad Centroamericana in San Salvador, El Salvador. So I am here. I am here in the spirit of Ignatius. I am here in the spirit of St. John Francis Regis. I'm here in the spirit of Jesus. I'm here in the spirit of all of these martyrs with these crosses around me. I'm here in the spirit of Ignacio Ellacuría, or as his companions called him, Ellacu, the spiritual leader and rector of their community. I'm here in the spirit of Ignacio Martín Baró, or Nacho, the founder and director of the Public Opinion Institute, for whom probably he was martyred. I'm here in the spirit of Armando Lopez, a philosophy professor at the UCA. I'm here in the spirit of Joaquin Lopez y Lopez, the director of a Center for Humanitarian Assistance in El Salvador. I'm here in the spirit of Segundo Montes. He was a sociology professor studying Salvadoran refugees in the US. I'm here in the spirit of Juan Ramon Moreno, the assistant director of the Monsignor Romero Center, Pastoral Center. Now it's known for a great library at the UCA. I'm also here in the spirit of Archbishop Oscar Romero, now saint, who was martyred for his the way he was compelled to tell the story of love and equity and justice for the people for the people of El Salvador during the Civil War, and was martyred on March 24th, 1980. I come in the spirit of Sister Ida Ford, came from the US, was a Maryknoll sister, served the refugees in Central America, and particularly in El Salvador, and was martyred on December 2nd, 1980, with 3 other church women. I come in the spirit of scholar and Catholic, Black scholar and Black Catholic woman, in the spirit of Sojourner Truth, Sister Thea Bowman. I come in the spirit of Elba Ramos and Selena Ramos, 2 people who literally were just there with the Jesuits when, please forgive me for the explicitness, but when their brains were shot, so were Selena and Elba, her mom. And Elba was a cook, and she actually thought that it would be safer to be at the Uka that night because of the danger around the neighborhood. So she brought her daughter, Selena, to the Uka, and that's where they were martyred. So it is in that spirit that I am here. It is in that spirit that I pray with, and I'm here with the cross signifying Elba Ramos's name and life. And I'm really glad that you're here, because without you, our Ignatian family wouldn't exist. After all, I mean, at least for me, it took me some time to truly understand that. As a high school student from St. Ignatius College Prep in San Francisco, I kind of didn't know that this family even existed. And no offense to my awesome teachers and my classmates at SI, but I guess I was pretty distracted. I wasn't really fully there to grasp the amazingness of this inclusion in the spirit of Jesus and Ignatius, right? To bring the margins in and to care for one another and to fight for what we think and what we know is right, to fight for God's dream for the world, for one another. So I guess I was kind of in my own stuff. So I'm really glad that you're here, because that tells me that you're kind of not in your own stuff and you're willing and you have the capacity to care for other people and to learn from other people. Our gathering is really, really important. We are a community of learners, willing to admit what we don't know and willing to share what we do know and how we know. We are a loose group of scholars, of activists, of friends who try their best to build God's kingdom of justice and peace. This year's theme, prophetic resilience, breaking down, building up, is quite intimidating for me, not gonna lie. When I get overwhelmed, I just try to take a deep breath and try to break it down. So prophetic. Prophetic as an adjective describing resilience. So if prophets like Isaiah, Jeremiah, Deborah, Samuel, Nathan, Elijah, Elisha, Ezekiel, Moses, Amos, these ordinary people that God called to bring God's message of deep and right relationship and wholeness to all people. You know, like that song that many of our Jesuit schools sing? We are called to act with justice. We are called to love tenderly. We are called to serve one another, to walk humbly with God. We say that's from Micah 6:8. So Micah, the prophet who spoke truth to power. And if resilience is the ability to withstand adversity and possibly return to the original form after being bent or compressed or stretched, or I would even say oppressed. And if resilience comes in generations, like those who fought to abolish slavery, then dismantle the Jim Crow South, to establish civil rights for all those formerly counted as 3/5 of a person, from Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. to John Lewis to Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Prophetic resilience. Then we need to know at least two things. One, what is the original form? What is God's original design? If we are all made in God's image and likeness, then does our diversity, oh no, then what does that diversity tell us about God? What does that diversity tell us about God's dream or intention or purpose for our world and our community together? Two, how am I, an ordinary person, called by God to take courage and call communities that I'm in into deeper relationship, into what is a right relationship, and what is more whole for all of us to live a more thriving life. So prophets and prophetic actions call us to be our best selves, no matter what the cost. Lord, teach me to be generous. Teach me to serve you as you deserve, to give and not to count the cost, to fight and not to heed the wounds, to toil and not to seek for rest, to labor and not to seek reward, save that of knowing that I do your will. So I have a few stories to share. You know, the after the colon, the breaking down and building up. I like to think that I've developed a deep concern for justice because all of this is pretty personal to me. I'm a gay, Catholic, female minister born of an immigrant family from San Francisco, California, whose first language is Tagalog. In high school, I was pretty lost. I didn't know much about my sexuality or my vocation. And I didn't really feel all too comfortable in the different groups of people that I befriended at school. I played tennis and softball for about 4 years, and I was pretty active in my church, but I felt like all of my identities were pretty compartmentalized, and there wasn't a piece of integrity that kind of unified all of those strands yet. So I wasn't really that smart or studious. It was really hard for me to find my place in school. I did like, people at my school. I liked some teachers. I particularly remember my geometry teacher, Mr. Arventelli, partly for the class that I was in, but definitely for a conversation I had one day when we were talking about geometry and how we can explain theology by explaining the difference between a point to a line to a three-dimensional to a four-dimensional space, and that we as human beings are three-dimensional and God is beyond that in time and space, and so it's in the fourth dimension. So God can understand us, and we have yet to understand the mystery of God. And I just realized that, wow, my geometry teacher and I had that conversation, and the successive years after graduation, he continued to send me postcards on my birthday. I remember Miss Winstrup. She was my Spanish teacher, and I remember looking up to her. She talked about how she volunteered after college, and I really thought that would be a particular interest to me because of the stuff that I like to do and to be of service at church. And so I first learned about the Jesuit Volunteer Corps through Miss Winstrup in my Spanish class. And when I heard that she was taking a trip to El Salvador with some students, I applied. And between my junior and my senior year, I went to El Salvador as part of an immersion trip. And not really because I was involved in campus ministry, but I knew Ms. Winstrup, and I was kind of hoping I would get her trip. And I was fortunate enough to be selected for that trip that has literally changed my life. And so I got to go to El Salvador and pray in the very garden that those Uca martyrs were massacred in. I got to be at the chapel of Oscar Romero, where he was massacred, but also did all the important ministry that he had done before. And for me as a high schooler, seeing and feeling from those places of specificity really offered my faith some substance, offered me some direction. I remember sitting one night in a village in Las Vueltas, actually in El Salvador, and we were reflecting on so much of the poverty that we had been seeing. And I kind of felt a little guilty about the things that I had in San Francisco and how my parents had devoted their life to a good education for me. Not only did they make an investment of their current monies, but a future investment, and they got into debt, amazing debt for my own education and for my own future. And I remember just feeling guilty that night And Miss Winstrup kind of drew this line, and she said, all of us are kind of on the spectrum. It may be linear, maybe circular, but some of us have more and some of us have less. And for some of us who have more, it really matters which way we're facing. Are we facing in the direction that constantly is wanting more, constantly wanting more ambition, more stuff, more notoriety, more pride? Like, are we more prideful? Like, all those things. Do we want more, more, more? Or is our education, our relationships banking on the fact that we need to turn? Like, where is God? Is God in the more, or is God here with the poor? And that could be poor economically, it could be poor in spirit, it could be all these pieces, but like, I like to imagine the more vulnerable, the less certain, the more at risk. And so that really it began to shift my understanding of my responsibility, or I like to play with words, right? Because English is my second language. My ability to respond to the situation. I was gifted with this family and this education at this particular Jesuit high school, and now what was I going to do with it? So I became really interested in how our communities were formed and how we not police, but how we govern ourselves. So I was interested in political science, but I was interested in patterns of human beings, so sociology, and in particular, as a woman, particularly in the Catholic Church, I wanted to study women's studies. So I went to Santa Clara University, shout outs to my Broncos, and I studied all those things to deepen my understanding of my own faith and my practice. Like, what am I called to be, to do? Who is this calling for? And it led me to do the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, led me to go to graduate study. And again, this is not the future for many of you. I'm just telling you a little bit about mine. And as a gay person, I didn't really know that I was gay, or I didn't want to face that fact up until the later end of my college experience. But I tried to find all these different ways to advocate for people who I knew were vulnerable. And maybe I knew it was me in the end, but really I knew that there were other people around me too who were struggling to come out. And as a junior, a friend of mine and I started this group, and I was so scared. I just remember being so scared. I didn't want to be part of the gay group. So we named our group Gasped. Right? Oh, shocking. Gay and straight people for the education of diversity. I know, I'm sure looking back, people are like, oh, totally, you were gay and you just didn't know it. Kind of like my high school teachers, like, oh my gosh, Jocelyn, you're all about justice, even when you didn't think you were. So it's really kind of fun for me to look back at my own life and trust the people who have been in there with me for their guidance and their mirroring of who I'm becoming. And so it was from that place of, I guess some people would call it brokenness, I would call it vulnerability, right? Of some disconnect, like the world says that gay people maybe are not good enough, but I'm gay and God says that I'm good. How do I reconcile that tension? I think prophets and prophetic actions, one of their main roles is to reconcile, to make sense of two things that seem so disparate and so not to get along, right? And to actually smooth that over and to make room for those things that are in tension. So every time I hear like a racial slur, like I'm Filipina, every time I hear a racial slur or a homophobic comment or a sexist joke, I personally feel wounded, feel hurt. And so I think of other people in the story of God that were wounded and shifted that woundedness to serve, to be of service to the world a little better, like Ignatius being hit by a cannonball and praying for a while and using his convalescence to rethink what it meant to be a warrior and a fighter and wanting to build God's kingdom after that. I think of Jesus and in his crucifixion. And I don't mean to be too somber, and I don't want to have a Messiah complex. So I think the best image that I can think of right now to illustrate this is my love for Moana. If you haven't seen the movie yet, oh my gosh, please go see it and let me know what you think about it. But I love the movie Moana because it's about a teenage girl who is supposed to be brought into this leadership. She's supposed to be the leader of her village, particularly after her the tribal leader, her father, passes on, and she has this call. She has this call from the ocean, right, to restore the heart of Tafiti. And basically, this island that has been, because of human activity, it's this origin story, from the Polynesian cultures. It's a whole mix match of so many stories that say, hey, there's this demigod Maui who grabbed the heart of this place called Tafiti that was about beauty and creation, and disturbed the balance of nature by grabbing the heart. Anyway, so the saga of Moana is beautiful for me, beautiful for my children. I've got a 2-year-old and a newborn, 2 months. And it's really great to kind of retell the story, because it's a story about restoration. There's this part where Moana goes to Tafiti and realizes that Tafiti is no longer there because of the destructive actions that human beings have done. And instead there's this big volcano monster called Taka. And the song, when she goes there, she takes courage, and because the ocean is on her side, the ocean makes room for this volcano to come and meet Moana. And Moana's holding the heart, and she holds it up, and she takes all the courage, and the sound in the film lessens, and you only just hear this gentle echo. Right? They're not fighting words. They're just this gentle call. And she says to Taka, I have crossed the horizon to find you. I know your name. They have stolen the heart from inside you. This does not define you. This is not who you are. You know who you are. So then she puts this heart, this little gem that looks like a little labyrinth, into Taka. And all of a sudden, all of Taka's hardness just falls. And the richness of the restored earth and creation of Tafiti comes and enlivens again, is awakened again. Those cast and hard fingers go back into the ground and actually give life, and it's full bloom. This world is finally restored, and it was because this teenage girl thought that she would just be encouraged by her ancestors to take this heart that she was gifted and put it back in the very place that was so angry at the world, and destroying the world. But instead, she took that heart to restore the heart of Tafiti. So I think of not just Ignatius and Jesus, like these people who are compelling figures for us, but I also think of these fictional characters like Moana, and how she inspires me to know who I am and to not be afraid of knowing who I am, because I think that very place of vulnerability is the very place where God can break in and use me to engage in a prophetic action for someone. Maybe someone needed to hear that there is just another gay person, or another person of color, or another woman, or another fill in the blank, any marginalized identity that can be made whole and restored, because we're claiming who we are, and we're not just accepted, but we accept ourselves enough to want to be included into God's dream for the world. So I think that prophets and prophetic actions have to, like Moana, have to translate and invite. They translate God's dream for the world to others. They invite people into a more expansive, more complicated, more personal experience where you see others and in turn are being seen. So I have a few questions for you to consider at the beginning of this teach-in. How does your participation and action for justice break down or actively interrupt processes that oppress? How does your participation and action for justice build up God's dream, right? The original form, the original purpose and intention of God's dream for the world, and possibly help to restore us all to that original purpose. Because again, it is perhaps in our own weakness, our own vulnerability, our own uncertainty that God is trying to break in. I love this lesson because it's literally my 2-year-old who tells me, she actually, the rest of the movie continues, and Taka and Moana tap their foreheads together. And then Moana whispers something to Taka. And my daughter did this to me. She comes up to me. Maybe she can tell that I was a little nervous about breaking this down for you all in this keynote address. And she looks at me and she grabs me by the neck, puts her forehead onto my forehead, and she says, "Who you truly are." Ah, Alejandra, she is so beautiful. So she reminds me, right? So she's a constant reminder to me that who I truly am will offer the restoration for me and my community. And I have no desire to hide from that anymore. So, is justice personal for you? It better be. That's what gives you energy and drive, because it matters in your life. Is it about a friend? Is it about a family member? Is it about a story of a person that you know? If it's not personal yet, take the time this teach-in to learn more from others' personal stories. Reach beyond the reef, as they say in Moana, or beyond who and what you know, who those friends are that you've known, and reach out to more friendships. So I want to end with 2 things, 2 prayers for you, a song and a prayer. Life is not at all that bad, my friend. If you believe in yourself, then you believe there's someone who walks through life with you. You'll never be alone. Just learn to reach out and open your heart. Lift up your hands to God, and God will show you the way. And God said, "Cast your burdens upon me, those who are heavily laden. Come to me, all of you who are tired of carrying heavy loads. For the yoke I will give you is easy, and my burden is light. Come to me, and I will give you rest." So again, a song I learned in high school. And now this is a prayer that I pray at my faith community every week. And so I offer this to you. Loving and gracious God, help us to understand and celebrate your dream for the world, to be transformed in Jesus' love, and to use our gifts to make a difference for others. Let us all say, Amen. Peace, and thank you. Have a good teach-in.